I want to start the recording? Okay. All right, we'll begin our public meeting this evening. A special meeting of the ACWD Board of Directors. Would the Secretary please take the roll?
Directors Gunther,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Huang, here, Weed,
Here.
and Sethy.
Here. Director Weed, would you like to lead us in the salute?
I believe allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic.
Do we have any members of the public attending online?
And I can do some real quick while the district
Housekeeping.
secretary is looking.
Yeah.
I can do some real quick housekeeping items. Just want to welcome everybody to this evening's special board meeting on behalf of the board of directors. My name is Ed Stevenson and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public participating in person may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda and presentation materials are available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or on your dial pad if you're participating by telephone audio. This hybrid board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. And thank you for the opportunity to give my housekeeping remarks.
Okay. So we're at item 3 on the agenda, which is public comments on matters on this notice of special meeting. But I'm aware of one guest in our audience, customer, who would like to speak. And although the Brown Act allows us to limit public discussion in a special meeting, I would like to offer the courtesy of this board to allow you to speak and have a chance to address your concerns. You would come up to the podium. Yeah.
I just want to address a water quality issue that I had late last year. I think the after hours phone service could handle the procedure a little better. I started getting a lot of air in the lines, and you know how it is, you get like water hammer and stuff. But I called up and I was told, oh, everything's fine, you should go ahead and get dinner and stuff like that, which I did do. And afterwards I was cleaning the dishes, white dishes, and I noticed they were getting darker as I was cleaning the dishes. And that really bothered the heck out of me. So I called up after hours again. And they basically, to warn them, maybe you could check my neighbors so they don't actually go through the same issue about drinking water. I have a sample here. You can see it looks fairly brown. I challenge any board member to drink this water because I did. I mean, hopefully it's okay. Nobody wanted to test it. I did speak with a couple of people like in the lab and so forth. And they assured me that in general, the water quality is fine. But again, they have no interest in looking at it. So again, I think this could be handled a little bit better. And I think water quality is an important issue for all of us. So that was one of the topics I was talking about. The other is I suppose you noticed all the rain and so forth. And I was hoping that eventually the board would take reconsider the drought conditions and drought surcharges. Considering a lot of dams are now releasing excess water. I feel really foolish for saving water while I'd see huge amounts of water being flushed by the dam, not even used for electric power. So I hope that the board would eventually address that. I understand Mr. Wonderlick will pass it on to the board eventually. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, I would invite you to stay for item 4.4 on the agenda, which is the very subject you are wishing to see addressed. That's really the focus of this special meeting, is to consider rescinding our drought surcharge.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And also, staff could give guidance to where they might be able to get water quality testing done or water sample that comes out of the staff.
Yeah, and what I've asked is to be contacted directly, so I can kind of get to the bottom of it a little bit more. It sounds like we want to look into things like what the after-hour service is communicating with regard to water quality inquiries, and then also want to try and get a little bit more detail about the water quality incidents themselves. So I've given Fred my card, and we can just touch bases.
Yeah, I hope this is just a temporary thing. One of the people I spoke with said there was some work in the neighborhood, which I didn't know about. Maybe if I known about it, I would have stopped using water for that evening or something. I mean, at least for consumption purposes.
We have means to assure people that their water is not a hazard. Whatever advice we could give to someone who has a question about the quality of their water.
Yeah.
Or even a sample that they take.
Oh, I got some here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just for formality's sake, I will ask if there are any public comments on matters on this notice of special meeting. Online, we have one from Mr. Ken Nishimura. Please go ahead.
Soon as we make sure Mr. Nishimura is unmuted. Okay. He is now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to make use of the special meeting rules because this is a talking about these item that's of the special board meeting, as opposed to waiting until later, because I do have a time constraint. Members of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors, I'm pleased that the topic to which I opined during the previous monthly board meeting is being addressed today. It is regrettable, however, that this required a special board meeting at significant expense to the ratepayers. This topic really should have been addressed at a scheduled agenda meeting at the previous regular meeting. I have read the staff presentation and support the recommendation of the staff to rescind the drought surcharge effective the 1st of April 2023. Given what we have all been experiencing, notwithstanding the governor slow walking repealing his drought emergency, it has become increasingly difficult to justify a drought surcharge. The most recent federal report shows that the entire Bay Area is no longer, quote unquote, abnormally dry, let alone in a drought. And just recently, we have seen Oroville Dam spillway in use for the first time since it's been rebuilt at 33,000 cubic feet per second. Ironically, the profuse precipitation which has led the federal government to remove the drought designation from the Bay Area may continue to negatively impact district finances. Given that a significant amount of annual district water deliveries is for external uses such as irrigation, the continued precipitation is likely to lead to reduced consumption of water and hence reduced revenues. Last year at this time, despite the drought, many residents were watering their lawns and gardens. This year, only a fool is presently irrigating their lawns. While the impact is not yet clear, the rebound of water deliveries as we head into the summer will be keenly watched. Although we all welcome the rain and the likely end of the drought, I am aware that the district is facing new challenges, such as emerging contaminants of concern and ensuring the reliability of imported water. The proposed new MCLs of PFOA and PFOS of 4 nanograms per liter will present new challenges for the district and result in additional capital and operational expenses. Further regulations governing other emerging contaminants of concern are not unexpected, along with additional associated costs. To be clear, I am not opposed to all rate increases. When justified, for example, due to the need for additional treatment processes required for regulatory compliance, reasonable costs should be borne by the ratepayers. When rate increases are proposed for justifiable reasons and are the minimum necessary, I will support them to ensure the long-term viability of the district and its mission to provide safe, reliable water at a reasonable cost. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak at this time? I don't see any online or in the public boardroom. So we will close item 3 and we will move on to our action calendar. And I'll turn it over to staff. The first is a resolution adopting a negative declaration on our PFAS treatment facility project.
Hey, thank you, President Sethy. And for this item, actually, all 3 of the next items all relate to our PFAS project and the work that we're doing to construct PFAS treatment. But for this item, I will turn it over to our project engineering manager, who is filling in for our director of engineering, Ms. Reka Ipagunta.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public and staff. I'll start with a quick summary on this agenda item number 4.1. PFAS compounds have been detected in the groundwater production wells at levels above the notification levels established by the state. District implemented operational strategies, however, that reduce the overall production capacity at our blender facility. So the groundwater PFAS treatment project that's proposed will restore the production capacity while delivering water below notification levels. So this project includes installation of a 15 MGD treatment facilities to be constructed in 2 or more phases. In accordance with the CEQA, an initial study and mitigated negative deck has been prepared for the project at a full 15 MGD capacity. Staff recommends by motion adopt a resolution that adopts the mitigated negative declaration for the groundwater PFAS treatment facility, 2, adopts the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. Number 3, approves implementation of the project. And number 4, excuse me. Number 4, authorizes the general manager to prepare and file a notice of determination for the project, DOT number 10119.
And I'll just note, staff did a fair amount of outreach in advance of bringing this item to the board this evening. We did have a community information meeting that we had some members of our board attend. We also sent letters and did have a AB 52 consultation with a local Indian tribe. And those various interactions didn't result in any written comments received and didn't change the environmental assessment in the document that the board's considering this evening.
Let me turn it over to the public first to see if there are any public comments. Don't see any, so we will bring it back to the board for discussion. Discussion from anybody?
We're now addressing the environmental impact report.
Yeah. Yes.
The proximity to the Hayward Fault. I was looking for a description, whether we were within the Alquist-Priola seismic safety zone, safety hazard zone, and whether a special study was required.
So as part of the design, we are looking at the proximity and the design of the seismic requirements according to the design code are incorporated into the design of the facility.
Well, my understanding of the Alquist-Priola is not the design of the facility itself, but rather locating the potential for earth rupture on the site. And therefore it needed geological study if you're within the zone identified on the map of the Alquist-Priola.
I would have to go back and verify that. I don't believe we have. We have conducted the geotechnical study and other structural evaluations, but this is something that I would have to go back.
My quick review, I didn't see a reference to that. So yeah, that is a state requirement for all projects to my knowledge. Doesn't relate to the design of the structure, but rather the soil conditions on the site itself. Because it's difficult to design any facility if you have to worry about surface rupture.
Yeah, so it sounds like staff has conducted, or through our consultants has conducted a geotechnical evaluation. And I would only surmise that the results of that investigation didn't result in any need to further evaluate from an environmental standpoint. But rather from a technical standpoint, of course, that's got to be a consideration in the project. Yes, fault rupture and ground displacement included. And we have done a number of projects on that site in the past and confronted the same issues.
So there may already be studies done
Yeah.
if needed at that location.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nothing from me.
Barney? Gunther? I'm fully supportive of the staff recommendation or recommendations. Is there a motion?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second. Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang. Aye. Weed.
Aye, with the reservation I stated earlier, which we're going to review. Thank you.
And Sethy.
Aye. We'll move on to item 4.2. Rejection of bids for procurement of vertical turbine pumps and motors for the same project.
Yeah, thank you, President Sethy. Yeah, both 4.2 and 4.3 have to do with equipment procurement processes that we're involved in right now, but I will turn it back over to Ms. Ibagunta to talk about 4.2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. This item is related to pre-procurement of equipment with long lead items. One of those items is vertical turbine pumps and motors. And this equipment is needed in support of the PFAS treatment facility phase 1, which is a 6 MGD facility. And the procurement documents were advertised in January. Staff received 2 bids and opened and evaluated the bids. It was determined that each bid included substantial deviations from the requirements of the bid specifications. And staff and general counsel have determined that all the bids are non-responsive. So with that information, with that summary, staff recommends by motion, reject all bids for the vertical turbine pumps and motors in support of the groundwater PFAS treatment facility phase 1, job 10119.
Thank you very much. Is there any public input on this item? Not seeing any. We'll turn this back over to the board again for comments.
None.
Nothing from me.
Likewise.
Okay, I'm fully supportive. Is there a motion from a board member? I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang. Aye. Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. We'll now move on to item 4.3, rejection of bids for procurement of pressure vessel systems for multiple media use in support of the same PFAS treatment plant.
Okay, and last item related to PFAS this evening, Ms. Ibagunta.
Okay, summarizing, this is very similar to the other item 4.2, another piece of equipment, which is a critical piece of equipment for the groundwater PFAS treatment facility is the pressure vessel procurement. And again, because of the long lead item, staff proceeded with advertising the procurement for pressure vessel systems, which are multiple media use systems in January, and we have received 4 bids. Open and evaluated. Each bid again included substantial deviations from the requirements of the bid specifications, and staff and general counsel have determined that the bids are non-responsive. With that summary, staff recommends by motion, reject all bids for the procurement of pressure vessel systems, multimedia use in support of the groundwater PFAS treatment facility, phase 1, job number 10119. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ipagunta. Any public comments on item 4.3? Don't see any. Bring it back to the board. Any comments? Doesn't look like any. So I would entertain a motion again.
Make the motion to adopt staff recommendation.
I'll second. Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang. Aye. Weed
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. Okay, item 4.4. Consider adoption of a resolution to rescind imposition of drought surcharges effective April 1, 2023.
Okay, so this is our headliner item for this evening. This is obviously the board has had a number of discussions related to the drought and the easing drought conditions more recently, and then the district's sort of measured approach to emerging from the drought, and that includes our existing drought surcharges. And on March 9, the board requested that staff bring this particular item back to the board so the board could consider rescinding the drought surcharge. So I will turn it over to Jonathan Wunderlich, our Director of Finance and Administration, who will walk us through staff's evaluation and recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members, staff, and public. The district's core mission is to provide a reliable supply of high quality water at a reasonable price to the communities of Fremont, Newark, and Union City. And as a part of that, the district does regularly review its finances and its rate setting to ensure we have sufficient funds to effectively accomplish our mission. Associated to that, one of the measures, really one of the many measures taken to respond to the current drought was implementing drought surcharges effective March 1 of 2022. And that's provided funds for ongoing sustainable operation of the district during the past year. But due to the district's financial condition, as well as improving water supply conditions, we do think it's appropriate to reevaluate the need. And that's why we're here this evening. And so we do have a staff presentation, and I'll go ahead with some support from Ms. Heides, our Water Resources Manager, and walk us through that presentation. And so we'll give a little history on the surcharge and then look at some different financial scenarios, and then we'll get to the recommendation. So it was implemented at 78.7 cents per unit, which is about 748 gallons or 100 cubic feet back on March 1st. And, primarily is a financial mechanism to make sure the district maintains the revenue it needs when water use decreases due to customer conservation. And so by receiving that temporary revenue source that kind of keeps the district whole from a revenue perspective, it means that we can maintain our capital investments. We can mitigate the impact of maybe needing to go out and buy more San Francisco water, our most expensive source of supply, which we've needed to do over the past year. Limits the need for substantial post-drought rate increases. So there are a number of benefits to the overall management of the district system that are provided by this type of temporary mechanism. Next slide. So in total, we've collected nearly $12 million from our customers over the first 12 months. Obviously, the surcharge is still in place today. And so that number will probably go up by, about another $750,000 to $1 million based on the month of March. The district's general fund balance during that initial 12 months. So it actually went up slightly, but only because we issued bonds. If you kind of exclude the impact of bringing in one-time money from the bonds in terms of our day-to-day revenues and expenditures, the balance went down approximately 2.6 million. And that's despite the fact that in the first few months of the surcharge, our customers were actually not conserving the amount we wanted. And so we were actually generating some excess revenue the first couple of months, but then customers started conserving more significantly. And so like if we narrow our review from just this fiscal year, July 1 through the end of February, the district's general fund balance went down $9 million during that 8-month period. So in terms of public engagement and board decisions, we did review the status of the surcharge back in February 9th, and we did update it effective March 1. And then at the regular March 9th board meeting, it was requested that staff bring an item about the surcharge back to the board. And so that's what we're here for this evening. Okay, so now I'm going to run through some financial planning assumptions. And so our current financial projections are all based on our current year adopted budget. And then, of course, we project out future costs based on escalation factors, based on what's in our adopted capital improvement program, based on future rate increases provided to us by SFPUC and the State Department of Water Resources. We're also assuming that we'll need to issue approximately $30 million in bonds in fiscal year 24-25 based on the current aggressive capital program. We're also assuming future rate increases. So we have the rate increase of 4% that just went into effect at the beginning of this month, and that's been authorized for March 1 of next year. But beyond that, it will require board action, but we are assuming 3% annual rate increases. San Francisco wholesale water rates went up 15.9% last July 1st. And they're expected to go up another 11.6% this July 1st. We were thinking only 10.5%, but based on the notice we received just within the past month, we're now expecting 11.6% this July 1st. And then we're also, very conservative in terms of what's our water demands going to look like with a 3-year post-drought increase to a new normal. And then the existing status quo financial assumptions are that the surcharge ends June 30th of this year. So again, the first metrics we'll show are based on this. So it's kind of the status quo. And so this is the exact same general fund ending balances chart you saw last month at the rate adoption hearing, where it shows at the end of the planning horizon, we're $4.9 million below our reserve target. And then here's our projected build demands, a low year this year at about 31.3 MGD, increasing over several years to a new normal of 34.2 MGD, which is a little bit below prior. So, we were at just about 36.5 MGD in fiscal year ending in 2021. We started to see some initial drought related conservation in fiscal year ending in 2022. So we got down to just under 34 and then, down this year as the low year. So we are projecting some measure of a permanent reduced water consumption in the future, which is not unlike the last drought from about 2014 to 2016. We had build demands of about 40 MGD per year before that drought. And then the 36.5 in fiscal year 2021 was the highest year after that drought before we hit this drought. And so we, continued to maintain a measure of ongoing water use efficiency from our customers. Okay, so here's the next model, and this is the one that aligns with staff's recommendations tonight, which is that drought surcharges are rescinded effective at the end of this month. No other changes to assumptions, so that means that water use restrictions associated with the drought will also ease by the end of this fiscal year. And so we'll go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. And so you can see here that's $7 million below our reserve target at the end of the planning horizon. So approximately a cost of $2 million of revenue by rescinding at the end of this month versus the end of the fiscal year, as was previously assumed in our financial planning documents. And then no change. This is the exact same projected build demands as what you saw with our status quo scenario. All right, next slide. Okay, and so when we talked about this in February, staff continued to have some concerns of if we go too quickly with rescinding the surcharge, well, what if it stops raining? And we need to keep our drought restrictions in place, right? So there's no surcharge, but we continue to have limitations on outdoor watering and other water use such that we would be, kind of pushing down water use and the associated effects on our build demands. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. And so what you can see is we get to where we're below the reserve target a year sooner, and then our ending balance at the end of the planning horizon is nearly 13 million below our reserve target. So, about an $8 million reduction compared to kind of the status quo assumptions. And so, kind of from staff's perspective, our concern was, hey, what if we go early, we rescind the surcharge, but we have to keep these restrictions in effect. And so there's that ongoing impact to where, we may have to start looking at, whether it's deferring capital projects, not fully funding our long-term pension and OPEB liabilities and some of those decisions. And then the next slide. One of the things associated with this too is our assumption is it would delay the recovery on our built demands by a year, right? Because we would have to keep the water use restrictions in effect. So we would stay at this lower, approximately 31 MGD for another fiscal year and then begin the increase after that. And so those are the assumptions here. And those are the three general financial scenarios we prepared for this evening. And if we could advance to the next slide, I will turn it over to Ms. Heides, our Water Resources Director, to talk us through our current view on the status of the drought and the easing of the drought conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. So I know the big question is the drought over? And so this first slide is a review of what we've presented earlier in the season about the couple of areas that the Board of Directors will consider when determining local drought emergency status. And the first is the status of the California Drought Emergency Declaration and various related executive orders and State Water Resources Control Board emergency regulations. And the second area is whether there is sufficient water supply to meet customers' needs based on both our local supplies and our imported water supply conditions, including the San Francisco Public Utility Commission's own water shortage emergency declaration. So to give a quick update on the current picture, our water supply picture continues to improve. We have seen good snowpack and storage conditions on our imported water supply systems. The snow statewide water content is 219% of the April 1st average. So that's really a big improvement since February and a healthy number. And the storage up at Oroville Reservoir, as was mentioned earlier, has also greatly improved and is currently 120% of average to date. And they have been doing flood control operations up at that reservoir and in many places across the state. We are currently awaiting our next state water project allocation update, hopefully soon. We're currently at 35%. And then we also expect more certainty following the April snow survey and runoff forecasts. On our San Francisco regional water system, the conditions are also improving, but they do remain in a water shortage emergency declaration at this time. Local groundwater conditions have significantly improved and we are operating within normal levels at this time. But to put in perspective, the state is in a period of transition and drought recovery. There's a lot of regional variation. We are seeing, a lot of surface water happening and flooding and all of that. But one thing to keep in mind, the state does depend greatly on groundwater as well, and that will take longer to recover. And so there will be some variation also throughout the state in different regions on how quickly areas will be able to recover and then also replenish their long-term storage supplies for drought. So the state also currently has a requirement in place to implement level 2 water shortage emergency actions. And that's something that was put into place previously and remains. Executive Order N323, most recently in February, reaffirmed the emergency status and called on state agencies to provide recommendations on necessary drought mitigation by April 28th. So what we expect is to be learning more in the coming weeks about what will change moving forward with the state's own emergency declaration and status. And last but not least, I just wanted to note that our own emergency declaration and water shortage ordinance can remain in effect in alignment with state requirements without the drought surcharge in place. So I will turn it back over to Mr. Wunderlich for the recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Hayden. So before kind of getting to the recommendation, I think some of what you've heard, but just to kind of follow up on this, is the surcharge has essentially served its purpose and its function the way we expect it to. It's provided the funds such that we haven't needed to delay any capital projects. We've continued to make our normal contributions to CalPERS for those long-term pension liabilities. Also, when you look at our long-range rate increase forecast, we're projecting, another 4% next year based on what was already approved, and still 3% per year after that. So there's no need for a significant post-drought rate increase. And these are all factors that we've talked about before publicly in regard to why we would look at a surcharge in these types of conditions. And last, I don't think very many of our customers look at the extra 78 cents per unit and on a financial basis drive their decision making on water use. I think some do. I don't think many do. But this first appeared on bills in March of 2022. And depending on the timing of when you get your bill, sometime between March and April is when you first saw it on a bill. And then you continue to see that on a bill every other month. And I think that was a signal to our customers of the severity of the drought. And I'll note, I did go back and review our conservation status by month. And May of 2022 was the first month in this drought where we consistently had savings or conservation compared to 2020. And then we maintained a really healthy conservation from May 2022 through this month. And so kind of with that overview, then the recommendation, now that we see a pathway out of the drought emergency, is by motion to adopt a resolution rescinding imposition of the drought surcharge effective April 1st, 2023. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions of staff from the board?
Minor comments, not questions.
Comments, please?
I never cease to amaze at the smoke that we blow in the water world when it comes to water consumption and conservation and implication on finances. We talk about San Francisco having declared an emergency. It's easier to talk about a third party. Santa Cruz earlier this year got an exemption from the drought emergency because they had a reservoir which was scheduled to be filled up and they'd met the conservation standards. San Francisco has almost 5 years of storage and has had it since the beginning of the year to meet the water requirement and local storage to meet the requirements of their customers. They have 100% in the water bank at Don Pedro. They could lose all their water supply system and be good for another 5 years in meeting their requirements for San Francisco and the Bay Area customers. That's not an emergency. They did encounter a major drop-off in water consumption, and there's a need for revenue. So this is not a conservation area. This is one when people stop using water, they need to increase their revenue. So they put in a drought service charge, not for conservation, because conservation is not their friend. They have water to sell. They need to cover the shortfall in revenue. Our situation is somewhat similar. And yet, when we look at the level of we went through a drought, 2 droughts now. Maybe we learned something. Hopefully we'd have. In the prior drought, we had a huge shortfall. Our water sales were only about $70 million a year. We had a $60 million shortfall over 2.5 years, and we had to cover that shortfall. Not because we didn't have water, and we needed, and we actually did have, for a short period of time, a true water shortage when the state cut off its water system and we couldn't take transfers. And we were able to get an emergency transfer from Contra Costa. But this is different. This time around, the amount of conservation and need was much more hardened. There wasn't nearly a reduction in our water sales. Reduction was far smaller. We've had over both droughts, or at least in this drought, a rate stabilization reserve. We didn't touch it. The drought surcharge we did is raised about $1 million per month, which has left us, what we had, and if we look at our total numbers, we're really about that amount ahead in total over that period of time. In addition, we've had some great fluctuations in our investment returns, but we're still, for this year, about $8 million to the good. And that $8 million is remarkably equivalent to the amount we had in the surcharge. We would have been even without a surcharge and gotten through this financially this year. It wasn't needed. It was needed in the prior drought. In the next drought, as our demand hardens, hopefully we will not use a surcharge because its time has come and gone. So I would hope that as we go forward, today we were 70 million in the last drought. We're about $120 million a year in sales in this drought. There's a lot more money. Our accounts are better padded. We are much more resilient to changes in revenue. And I still would hope that we would bring our variable cost in line with our variable expenses and our fixed cost in line with our fixed expenses, and we would even be in better shape. One of the frustrations we have is we have no reliance on our budget, our primary planning tool, because we really don't have a good prediction on what our revenues are going to be when we're using variable income to cover fixed cost. In 2015, we missed it by 40%, projected a 15% deficit, and we ended the year because the water had turned and people would start using $3,000 an acre foot water to irrigate their lawns again. So we had a 25% surplus. When you have a 40% shift in the budget of a public utility, you have a problem. That's a structural problem that's based on our rates. And I'd hope when I come up to rates again, we cut our commodity cost in half, double the service charge, and from there, we can start making appropriate adjustments. So that's my comments. I fully support getting rid of the drought surcharge. I've not supported it from the beginning. Thank you.
Director Huang.
May I? Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to focus my comment on the drought surcharge since this is not a board meeting to discuss rate structures. So for me personally, the drought surcharge has two purposes. One is to make us financially whole to fill the shortfall from not selling as much water. And two is to send a price signal to our customer that conservation is very important. I think the surcharge has served its purpose. It has helped us out financially. And at this point, with all the rains, I don't think people are watering at all. It would be a very interesting homeowner that decide to water their lawn when it's raining cats and dogs. So I think the surcharge has definitely served its purpose. It will also be very difficult for us as a board to explain to our customers that they need to conserve and they'll be penalized for using water when it's raining cats and dogs and we're talking about flooding and levee breaches in areas not in our district. So I would definitely support staff recommendation and remove the drought surcharge.
So my comments echo Director Huang's comments. I think, like was mentioned by Mr. Wunderlich, I think the drought surcharge did serve its purpose for us. And I think at this point it's difficult for us to defend keeping it on. So I am supportive of rescinding the drought surcharge as well. And I think from the discussions that we've had with members of the public, with comments that we've received in our board meetings, I think there's a tremendous appetite from our customers for us to review this and potentially look at rescinding it. And I think this is the right time for us to do so. So I'll be supporting staff's recommendation tonight.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep this on target. I'm fully in support of the item. I believe it's time. Back when we first looked at this in February, yes, there was still a chance that it was gonna stop raining. Well, it hasn't stopped raining. And it's getting possibly worse. Now, it's still not over. I mean, we could have a massive melt and that would be quite difficult. Groundwater basins may go up a little bit with that, but then half the state would be flooded. In our last rate proposal, the 4%, what we didn't really talk about this evening was the fact that we had a drought surcharge also on that listing. And a lot of questions from the public were, what do you got this for? Alameda Creek is almost overflowing its banks. Dry Creek looks like Alameda Creek in the summertime or even higher. And it has looked that way over in Union City for a week or more. And it's still flowing and flowing hard. We're going to take a hit on this revenue wise. We will. And we'll get through it. We have our problems out there and about 4 or 5 years out. We'll see how it goes. A lot of that's going to depend on the rebound, what happens the next couple of years. But the public's confused. I fully understand why. And I think we really need to get rid of this. Now, we know how much water we're going to sell. I disagree with some comments made earlier. We know what we're going to sell. We've done it now through 2 droughts. We know what the public will buy. Basic water. And we can get pretty close. Now, that's not on the agenda tonight. It's been on the agenda in previous nights. I just wanted to reiterate that we know what they're going to buy. So our rate structure is fine, is my opinion. But that is not on the agenda tonight. What is rescinding this surcharge. I fully support it. I know we're going to take a hit. We don't know what the recovery rate's going to be because the forecasts are still showing rain. And I mean, nobody's out there watering their lawn. What's happening is their trees are falling over. So the good thing, I mean, I guess that we've got this much water. I think initially during the drought, at some point, I heard somebody say we needed like 6 atmospheric rivers, maybe 7 to recover. And I think we're on number 11 or 12. So that's good news. Let's hope the snowpack holds up. Let's hope we get some more allocation from the state. Maybe we could send some of that south. That should be able to help the basins out in the valley. We already water bank. Everybody talks about water banking. We've been doing it for years. So I'm fully in support. I'm happy in a way we're doing this. I'm happy we did it tonight. We could have waited, but I think it was important that we did it now. So kick in April. That's only a couple weeks away. Gives us chances for billing and everything else. I think it's important for us to make that message. Yes, we rescinded it. A lot of people questioned whether we would or not during our rate hearing. It's one of the things we kept hearing. I think tonight we're sending that message that no, we've done it before, we're doing it tonight, and we'll do it in the future if we have to. That's all I got.
Thank you, Director Gunther. First, I just want to say how much I appreciate the remarks and comments of Mr. Wunderlich and Ms. Heides. I think you summarized the effectiveness of the drought surcharge quite well and what the present circumstances are for permitting us to consider rescinding the drought surcharge while still maintaining compliance with the state water conservation requirements. So one thing I would like to point out for our audience is how effective I think the drought surcharge was. And the proof is in the pudding. And I'm talking facts here, not making up numbers. Last year, at this time in the fiscal year, we were within 1% of our operating revenues, exceeding our operating expenses. This year, we are almost at exactly the same position with increased a little, almost the same revenue. 81 million in revenue and about $750,000 over our operating expenses. And to me, that's the true test of whether you have a district that's operating efficiently and not trying to take advantage of our customers, where we're making a lot more operating revenue than our expenses. At the same time, it's noteworthy that while our water consumption went down, our purchased water costs went up, and quite dramatically, from less than 21 million up to 26 million from the last fiscal year at this time to where we are right now. And a lot of that is attributable to what we saw earlier here, a 15.9% increase on San Francisco water last July, and then another 11% now. These are big rate increases where we have to pay to offer have this as being part of our water supply portfolio. And it's water that we really can't reject. We need it we need the San Francisco water to blend with our hard groundwater, so we come up with a nice blend for the community. So it's not something that we can just say, well, we're not going to accept any more San Francisco water. And then certainly we've had the restrictions from the state where we were down to 5% allocation this past year. And we're at 35% right now, hopeful that we can get back to a normal level of 50–60%. So I think the drought surcharge actually, we couldn't have forecasted it any better in terms of the amount of substitute revenue that would be needed to make up for the loss of revenue on commodity sales. And so I, of course, will support rescinding the surcharges, but I just wanted to be noted that I do find, like Director Huang said, that this is an effective tool that we may have to consider utilizing again in the future. So with that, I will open up to any public comments. Please state your name.
My name is Fred. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My personal experience is that I appreciate all the positive comments from the board and staff about the water situation and potentially considering rescinding the surcharges. But
the surcharges really did have a personal effect on me as well. I've had a garden for at least 20–30 years now. And I noticed that in the last few years, it's becoming uneconomical for me to use water to grow my own vegetables. So something really terribly has gone wrong here. I mean, the surcharge has really made it obvious that it didn't make any sense. I should buy my vegetables instead of growing it myself. And I think that reflects what's going on in the state. About 80% of the water use is roughly agricultural. So how can they grow the vegetables cheaper than I can with ACWD water? They're obviously getting some benefit of water benefits from the state that we're not getting here as ordinary citizens. So what I'd like to see is that this water company should do a better job advocating for the residents, the people that consume the water. I feel like in some ways that the farmers have this considered right to like pump out the groundwater and then say, well, we have a drought because the groundwater is too low now. And then suddenly we as citizens that consume water that don't use any Central Valley groundwater suddenly are blamed for that. It's shifting the blame from to the citizens. So I'd like to see this water company do a better job advocating for your customers. So I appreciate that. It's just a different way of looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Likewise, I've always grown a summer and winter vegetable garden, and could not grow one last summer.
Actually, for me, it's 2 years because
Yeah, exactly. So, any other public comments? Not seeing any? Any additional board comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make the motion to adopt staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. Okay, we'll go to general managers reports at this time.
Thank you, President Sethy. I have a couple to get through real quick. First of all, just following up on the last item, staff plans on issuing a press release probably tomorrow that lets our customers know about the board's action this evening. As was mentioned here, staff's in agreement that it's important that we ensure that our customers understand that we've followed up, that the board has followed up on its commitment to rescind those surcharges when the time was right. So we'll be putting that out likely tomorrow. Ms. Ipagunta didn't appreciate my my surmising that the CEQA document was fine, so she wanted to make sure the board received the specific answer to Director Weed's question on that item.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I just wanted to make a note that I didn't remember top of my head, but looking back at the initial study and CEQA document under section 3.7, environmental evaluation has been completed for the earthquake fault rupture as well as seismic ground shaking. So the impact has been identified to be no impact because the project area is not located within the designated Alquist-Priolo earthquake fault zone. And also for seismic ground shaking, a geotechnical evaluation has been completed and the impact and the mitigations have already been identified on the report.
Quickly, yes, while we were in the meeting, I did identify the section of the report which said that this was not in the Alquist-Priolo. The terminology, I believe, should say a seismic hazard study area, not the seismic area. But also I was surprised it did not, I've seen in other documents where it mentions the distance from the fault and the faults in the area, and that was not in this document. But
Yeah,
it's not necessary to be apparently if it was the real key is from an operational standpoint, is it in the seismic study area that's required? It requires a study. Thank you.
I will say that with seismic speed, the head of project engineering came to the rescue.
E wave, S wave, I think it was an I wave. Also, and we just lost her as one of our public attendees that was on the line till just a moment ago. I think she probably wasn't that interested in seismic discussions. Sonia Warwick, who's the editor of the East Bay Echo, which is a new online publication covering the Tri-City area and also the Hayward area, visited us on Friday, and Laura Heides, Shireen Gonzalez, and I had a nice conversation with Miss Warwick. And she's working right now on some stories related to PFAS, and she was interested in how the district is addressing that issue, how the district is addressing future water scarcity issues, and the district's plans related to recycled water and so forth. So we expect in our discussions with Ms. Warwick that she may be putting out an article or so over the next, maybe even this week. So if staff sees that, we'll be sure to forward it on to the board. Finally, tomorrow is World Water Day. Wonder if you knew that. I will be honest with you, I didn't know that. There's lots of days, but tomorrow's World Water Day. And so this is a day to really specifically to kind of raise awareness about water scarcity around the world. The focus of this year's World Water Day has more to do with sort of sanitary conditions and the need for attention to the lack of sanitary conditions in many areas around the globe. So just wanted to make sure the board was aware that we'll be celebrating World Water Day tomorrow. And that completes my general manager's reports for this evening.
If I can add to that, tomorrow on World Water Day, the United Nations is holding their first major conference, international conference on water issues. I believe for the first time in 50 years. This will be in New York City for a couple, I think it's 2 or 3 days. And they plan to draft up a whole new set of resolutions for the commitments that the world needs to make in terms of providing clean water and clean sanitation for people. Any director comments from the board? I'm going to comment on the meeting that we went to last night.
Well, I would note one issue we'll be discussing, hopefully in the Water Resources Committee. The state of California has rejected the proposal of Kern County Water Bank. 50% of the Kern County Water Bank is semi-tropic. The 320,000 acre feet a year that Kern County pumps, 160,000 is out of semi-tropic. We have over 100,000 acre feet of water and storage in semi-tropic, which is now subject to the SIGMIC reviews. It was mentioned in the newspaper articles that went with it of the several county districts within Kern County, of which semi-tropic is the largest. Kern semi-tropic was asking to draw down their groundwater table 200 feet below the level of the neighboring groundwater districts. So we'll see how that plays out. And we have a lot of water and investment at stake in this issue.
And can I just say, staff read your mind because it is on the agenda for tomorrow's
Yeah.
Water Resources Committee.
So it's one of those wake-up calls.
I saw that it's the last item on the agenda tomorrow.
So for member of our public, if you're curious or interested in learning about our groundwater banking program, the committee meeting is tomorrow afternoon starting at 4:15. And it's online and in person.
John, do you want to comment on the special districts meeting yesterday?
We had a dinner meeting last evening with the speaker. Well, this is the Alameda County Special Districts, which ACWD, the water, hospitals, parks, recreation districts, local are all part of this special districts in Alameda County. Speaker spoke on was an assistant city manager in Santa Rosa, has a career in assisted living and housing programs, and spoke about the need for collaboration among the various districts and entities in addressing the problem of housing in California. And we put together a gift basket. Paul Sethy put together a gift basket, and I believe I owe you a little money for that. And
No,
that's fine.
and Gina.
Hey, Gina.
Gina spearheaded this.
And it consisted of some very good beers. I'll let Paul go into the description.
And the
Thank you.
gift basket was not prepared with ratepayer dollars.
So. General manager, myself, you can kick in, John. Wish. So, yeah, go ahead.
I should have mentioned this under item 4.4, but I know we mentioned that we'll put out a press release, but I'm hoping that we also have coordinated social media pitch.
Yeah, for sure. We're not taking our foot off the gas. We'll do sort of the usual suite of social media updates, and we'll be updating our website and all of the sort of usual things too.
Okay.
Thanks for mentioning that.
And do we plan on reaching out to folks who may have provided comments to us during the rate hearing process as well? Because I know, we got quite a few emails that specifically addressed the drought surcharge.
Yeah.
Now that we've rescinded that, I think it would be potentially a good time for us to reach.
We'll
back out
see
to-
what we can find in the way of ensuring that we know who those folks were. Not everybody identifies themselves, as you know,
Okay.
but certainly we can look and see what we do have and be happy to do that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we get we get the message out there to the ratepayers,
Yeah.
particularly those who had raised concerns about the drought surcharge. Thank you.
Again, I think given how quickly this is coming up, you know, certainly there will be messages in the bills that go out, because it will be prorated in April and May, because we have a 2-month billing cycle, and but certainly we'll see when somebody submits an electronic protest, there's usually an email address that they include, so there may be a way for us to do a notification through that avenue.
Thank you, Director Akbari. Okay. So first I have an agenda item request, which is I hope not too burdensome on the staff, but I would like us to have an update on our solar rollout. Solar initiatives. And number two, I wanted to comment on the meeting last night, the Alameda County Special Districts Association meeting. It was the first time in 4 years we were able to meet because of the pandemic. We had 80 people there, which was a really good turnout. And almost every agency in Alameda County was in attendance, except for our neighboring agency, Union Sanitary. So next time you have a meeting with them, you can go kick butt.
The Union Sanitary meets on Monday nights, so it may have been that there was a problem there.
Oh, could have been. Okay. I find these meetings to be really beneficial, especially when we have the chance to talk with our neighboring water districts from East Bay Mud, Zone 7, and Dublin San Ramon. And so there was a real good cross exchange of information. I felt I learned something from my counterpart board members, and we did have quite a good discussion about water quality issues at our table with Dublin San Ramon and Zone 7. So that was, I think, all in all, very healthy. And our beer bust package, which was Gina's idea, but which we all put together, finally went. The winner of that was recently retired board member Frank Mellon from East Bay Mud, who's been on their board for 28 years. And he was tickled pink that he won this prize, but he thought it was just the Heineken barrel that he was taking home. He didn't realize it was everything else that we had put together. And so he was really thrilled. And then lastly, I want to comment on the presenter last night. The gentleman has quite an extensive public policy background, and I was very, I learned a lot from his comments about collaboration among agencies when you're trying to solve problems and work on issues. There was a couple that came to mind. I won't mention specifically here, but really good techniques on how to pull people together, and even when you have contrasting views on issues. Where I differed with the speaker, and I actually challenged the speaker, which I don't normally do in a venue like that, but I felt I had to, was his assertion that getting rid of redevelopment districts back in 2012 was the primary cause of homelessness in California. And Director Weed and I are the two representatives for all the special districts in Alameda County on the Alameda County-wide oversight board that is still managing the disillusionment of redevelopment obligations by the different cities. And I thought this was a very skewed point of view that getting rid of redevelopment agencies suddenly created this vacuum of money that that created or exacerbated the homeless crisis. My own view is, as I expressed, and I felt I had to take a stand there because I am representing all those members across all the special districts in our county. And I was thanked afterward for stating very clearly that it was the special districts, the community colleges, the schools, the hospital districts that had their assessed valuations frozen in time, and the tax increments every year going to the cities to fund their development projects. And that very little of it went to address homeless needs or low income housing. And my counterpart from the Contra Costa Special Districts Association, we had quite a few of their members there last night too. She buttressed the comments that I had made immediately and said, no, sir, you've got the wrong interpretation here. We had money stolen from all of our non-municipal government agencies in order to support redevelopment. And I said very clearly that when Governor Brown campaigned for governor, became governor, and pushed that through the legislature, it was popular across California because there was too much fraud over this experiment in government that went back to the 1950s. It was a failure, and it was robbing our schools and other government agencies of the funds that they needed to operate with. And that it was a popular decision in the eyes of the California voters. So I don't think I've ever had to stand up to a speaker in a venue like that, but our chair said, I think it was proper to defend the members who were there. So I was glad I had a few words to say. Probably shocked Director Weed.
No, I'm in agreement with I was involved in the anti-redevelopment efforts with a group called MORE, Municipal Officials Against Redevelopment Reform, led by Chris Norby, who later was a supervisor in Orange County and later got in the assembly. But redevelopment grew to 10% of all property taxes in the state of California. 20% of that went to housing, and that portion I think was defensible. It's the 80% that was subject to abuse and fraud. Some of the most mind-boggling investments. When it died, I went with a group to the dive bar on K Street in Sacramento and toasted its demise. That was a redevelopment funded project, which had a mermaid swimming in a pool at the bar. So
All right.
I am not a fan of redevelopment.
I think we're going off on a tangent here in a public meeting. Okay, any last minute comments from anybody? Right, seeing none, we'll call the meeting adjourned at 7:15. Thank you, Fred, for attending.